Yeah. Hey, everybody. I hope you're doing better today than the Rochester Post-Bulletin is. I guess I had to come down here to just say one more last goodbye to this place that, well, men and women laid a cornerstone on the building that had stood here, that they had hoped would be here for many, many years to come. The Rochester Post-Bulletin is gone. It's exploded. No, metaphorically, I didn't do that. This building's gone. They put a time capsule in there that they thought they would dig up in 100 years. Well, that plan didn't work out for the Rochester Post-Bulletin. What happened to this paper? Once a daily paper produced in a community which had maybe 25% of the current population of Rochester when this began. Olmsted County now numbers almost 190-some thousand souls, and we don't have our own community newspaper. This paper was a powerhouse from Minneapolis, St. Paul to Chicago. There was nothing in between that was like this newspaper. The reach and stretch, the corporate accounts. They had a publishing facility here with employees that published papers for the surrounding small towns. It was amazing. Advertising, all of the money that ran through here, the economic prosperity that it ushered in, the local writers, the local talent, local sports, covering the schools, covering the obituaries. Sadly, it's not just that the readership began ending up in the obituaries. It's that the readership actually didn't like what they were reading, and they turned off their subscriptions. The subscriber base walked away. The local towns said, you know what, we can do it better ourselves. And smaller towns began their own publishing operations. Not only that, but advertising has sort of dried up. So although Rochester is a much larger town and Olmsted County is far more populous than it was back in the 1950s, no, the Rochester Post-Bulletin, once a mighty economic force, is down to a two-day-a-week rag. People might line their, canary cages with it. You might wrap your fish in it in the summertime, but nobody's reading it for any journalistic purposes. The last time I was in this building, I remember quite clearly, it was because of the guy on the t-shirt that I'm wearing right here, who's become kind of a friend, no, pardon me, I shouldn't say that, a hero of mine. Talking about this guy, Nick Sandmann, who stood down the face of hate hoaxing and anti-race. He was the real anti-racist. He was the adult in the room. Kyle Rittenhouse was also someone who did that. What this paper did was they vilified both Kyle Rittenhouse and they vilified Nick Sandmann. And the last time I went to this building, I spoke with the editors about what they had published about Nick Sandmann. I said, you guys clearly didn't do your own research. You haven't looked at the actual materials, the original source materials about what happened to Nick Sandmann. The editor sort of hemmed and hawed and apologized. Not really. He said, well, it's not something that we write. We just get these stories from the Associated Press wires, and then we just run with it. I said, yeah, but you have a right to decide what you print and what you publish. So you're responsible for right-clicking and dragging that article into place. You're promoting what they're saying about this guy. And all of those articles were sent to the people who owned the newspaper, but also to Nick Sandmann's attorneys. I'd like to think that Rochester deserves local journalism, journalists who have the ability to reflect the interests, the likes and dislikes of our community and our town, rather than the corporate interests of some people in New York City or San Francisco or Washington, D.C. That's what happened to the Rochester Post-Bulletin. Eventually, the Smalls family sold it off to the Fargo News, it's called the FCC, which I think is sort of a spin-off of the Federal Communications, but it's called FCC, Forum Communications Corporation. I think that's what the alphabet soup stands for. But what they could have done was just focus on creating a newspaper that would reflect what people in our community were thinking and feeling, instead of thinking that they need to socially engineer us into becoming something that we're not, because we're not good enough. I mean, it's hard to understand, but it's also kind of easy to understand. And I wish that the people who worked at the Post Bulletin now in the little office that they lease, the office from which they publish, but it's printed up in Red Wing, I wish that they would take this lesson to heart and start trying to reflect the community that you're supposed to represent. Get back to some basics. Start serving your people. Take a look. This was the once mighty Rochester Post Bulletin building, and it's gone. Just saying. Hey, Rochester, we can do better.